I can't. I think it.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. We're missing one commissioner. I'm sure he's going to be here shortly. We're going to move on to agenda item number 8, Bear Population Assessment and Bear Committee Report. Western Region Biologist Carl Lackey, Dr. Jim Sedinger, Dr. John Beckmann, and Commissioner McNinch for possible action. The department's current assessment of the black bear population will be presented along with the quota development process, and the Bear Committee will report on their related recommendations to same. So who we, Carl, are you starting it off?
Thank you, Chairman. For the record, Carl Lackey, Department of Wildlife. All right, I'm going to present the current population estimate, how we came up with those numbers, and then I'll go over a quick quota analysis, and then I'll introduce Jim Sedinger and John Beckmann. Okay, we are managing the bear population for multiple use. We are maintaining a viable bear population, allowing for a limited hunt, consumptive use by sport hunters, and still allowing a viable population, a thriving bear population, for all those other aesthetic values that people cherish. Program MARC, our population modeling analysis or tool, has been used now 3 times in the last 10 years. Dr. Beckmann used it in 2002 in a little bit different way, but nonetheless, Program MARC. Population estimate at that time was 180 plus or minus 117. Sample size was 99, so keep that in mind. Dr. Sedinger used it with John and I for the 2008 estimate. That estimate was 253 plus or minus 27 with a sample size of 197. So again, with those over a longer period of time, larger sample size, you see those confidence intervals shrink. Current estimate is 456, 2011 estimate. Again, sample size increased from 197 to over 250, and the confidence intervals likewise decreased. It's 456 plus or minus 39, so less than 10% confidence intervals. Very, very tight. Now the growth rate, I know that's, people have been throwing a lot of numbers around, and just keep in mind, we've said this before, that the growth rate varies. It can vary considerably. It can go up and down, go from positive or negative. But what we're looking at is a population estimate that has increased from 250 to 450. We know it's conservative because of all the other reasons that we've explained before, mainly the capture probabilities. We're dealing primarily with bears that are conflict bears in the urban areas. Because of that, all those other bears, the wildland bears in the population, are not represented proportionately in the model or in the population estimate. They're there, just not as proportionately. The study area, you know, and when I say 456 bears, I'm not saying that's all the bears we have in the state. Again, it's a conservative estimate for the study area. When we look at the study area, we're basically describing the entire Carson Front, or the Carson Range in Nevada, including the Lake Tahoe Basin, the area from Peavine Mountain, Verdi, all the way down to Lake Topaz, Gardnerville, and the associated valleys, Truckee Meadows, Eagle Valley, Carson Valley, and the western flank of the Pine Nut Mountains and the Virginia Range. That's where our conflicts have concentrated for the last 15 years. not just the Tahoe Basin. Viable populations do exist elsewhere. We know that. And it's been said, well, we don't really have a good handle on our wildland populations, but we do to a certain extent. Okay, our collar-in data clearly shows a lot of movement back and forth. And we're assuming they just don't go over there to catch the views. There's some genetic relatedness going on there. There's some breeding going on there. These populations are interconnected according to the collar-in data. Furthermore, when we start, Jim asked me a couple weeks ago, or last week, he said, give me an idea on how many bears you have outside the study area that you've marked. So we can just do a very rough, quick calculation of a population estimate, mark recapture in those areas. So we did it. In the same time frame, 1997 to 2011, we've handled almost 100 bears in those outlying areas, which when you look at bear studies across the U.S., sample sizes, if guys get 10, 15, 20 bears, 30 bears, they're doing really good. We've handled almost 100 bears in those outlying areas. I've marked 34 of them, and this is very quick analysis, but 34 of them were marked. Some of those we know have died. So a very, very rough calculation, population estimate in those areas came out to 286 bears. Now granted, that population melts to a certain extent with our study area population, because those bears are interconnected, the population is interconnected. But nonetheless, it kind of paints a picture on just how many bears are out there on the landscape. It's considerable. Now, a lot of emphasis was placed, or has been placed, on the California population estimate. And just something I want to throw out there, and Dr. Hopkins mentioned it yesterday, and I'm glad he did. Harvest statistics are not a great indicator for a population estimate. There's a lot of intricacies within your population demographics that aren't addressed by harvest statistics. Nonetheless, that's how California models their population. Their population model relies very, very heavily on their harvest statistics. So if harvest goes up for whatever reason, or it goes down for whatever reason, it affects their population model. Our population model is based on mark recapture. It's much more precise, it's much more accurate, and hence the confidence intervals. Even with the higher population estimates that we're seeing now, we don't want to, our recommendations were not to increase the quotas. When you look back at 2008, 253 bears, our quotas were very conservative at that time. They're even more so now. We do not want to increase them though. According to our management plan, we're going to start looking at data on a 3-year basis. I don't want to change anything for 3 years. We altered the season to a slight extent, cut off 2 or 3 weeks in the early part of it. But other than that, we want to keep the quota. We want to keep everything else the same, quota and tag numbers the same. The female quota, I'll address that now. We removed the separate female part of the quota this year for a couple different reasons. One, we have an approved management plan with harvest criteria, or those safety nets in place. Last year when we set the quotas, we did not have that. I wanted to put in some sort of protection for the female segment of the population. We did that. We don't need that this year because we have it in the management plan now. Second reason is there's a lot of concern last year from hunters, from the tag holders, and some of it was expressed, that by having the separate female quota, especially when the first 2 bears killed were both females, guys started getting nervous. They started thinking, okay, I have to go out and kill my bear right now before this season closes. And several guys expressed that to me, especially when we started hitting 4 and number 5. There was one guy that actually killed a female bear, ended up being an older female, a pretty big female, but he actually killed that bear because he was worried that that quota was going to be coming to a head and that the season would close. Those guys wanted to make sure they got their bear before that happened. So I think by removing that female quota, there's a chance that we'll actually see, I don't know if we'll see less females in the harvest, but I think that pressure will be taken off those guys to run out and kill the first bear they see. And those harvest criteria I'll mention real quick. I'm sure you've seen the management plan, but it's percent females in the harvest, percent adult females within that female segment of the harvest, and median age of males. If 2 or more of those thresholds are met, positive or negative, either way, 2 or more are met, it's an indication that you want to look at adjusting the quotas either up or down, depending on which way it's going. But that's not the only thing that comes into our decision making, and by no means is that the only way that we're going to continue to monitor this population. I think that was kind of the assumption made by several people yesterday, that because we have these harvest criteria, we're not going to monitor the population. No, we are. We continue to go out and mark bears. Every single bear we capture and release is marked. We're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to estimate the population based on that data. Couple other things just to keep in mind. Quota of 20, 450 bears in the population, which again is conservative when you're looking at the heterogeneity and the capture probabilities and all that. 5% of the population or the quotas are less than 5% of the population estimate. It's compensatory mortality at that point, and Jim can explain this more, but that level of sport harvest is barely detectable, if at all, in the population model. A lot more bears would have to be killed on an annual basis to actually show up in the population model because of the confidence intervals that we're looking at. Compare that to some of the other forms of anthropogenic mortality that we've seen over the years. We've documented 330 mortalities in the last 15 years. 330, and only 4 or 5 of those are for unknown reasons. The rest were all man-caused, hit by cars, management kills, accidental kills, a couple illegal kills, whatever. 330, 149 were hit by cars. Compare that to our quota of 20. You know, we're killing on the average 22 bears a year without the sport hunt. Last year we had a little over 1,150 or so applicants for the bear hunt. This year it almost doubled. Over 2,300 applicants for the bear hunt this year. That includes bonus point only. I didn't separate those out, but nonetheless, that 1,156 to 2,300. That's a big jump. It shows both interest in the bear hunt, as well as the fact that, of course, the bear hunt application was part of the big game application process this year. Last year it wasn't. And I know that had something to do with the increase in applications. Nonetheless, interest is there. Jim Sedinger is here. He can answer questions more specific to the population modeling and the techniques and the population demographics. Dr. John Beckmann is also here. I'm going to bring him up now. He has to leave about 11 o'clock to catch a flight back to Kansas. But John and I have been intimately involved with this bear population for, myself, 15 years. I've known John for 13 years. And by that I mean we're the ones that are actually out there handling these bears, gathering this data, and then analyzing this data. We've analyzed it several times over the years, over and over, last couple of years with Dr. Sedinger. So I'd ask that you trust us. We know what we're doing. I'm accountable for this bear population. Endow and myself. Last thing I want to do is see this bear population tank. I want to see it thrive. We have bears moving into historic habitat. I want to see that continue to happen. My own personal opinion, I think that's pretty cool. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Beckmann, and he can address some of the concerns that were brought up relative to his studies.
For the record, John Beckmann, WCS and adjunct faculty at University of Nevada, Reno. I just want to make a couple of points that came up yesterday for clarifying points from the science perspective in the bear subcommittee meetings yesterday. A lot of the data and peer-reviewed publications that myself and Carl have put out over the past decade or so concerning this bear population. There's been a lot of comments written and made concerning some of the data that we've published, and I just want to do a couple of things of clarification. The first is when you look at some of the papers we published looking at differences in density between urban bears and backcountry bears. At the time, those were the density estimates that we calculated. Those density estimates in some of those papers are now 10 years old, so they need to be updated with our new population estimates. And so these density estimates of 3 bears per 100 square kilometers in backcountry and 120 bears per 100 square kilometers in front country areas need to be adjusted with the new population estimates. I think it's important to note a couple things. Even though those densities are extremely high in urban areas, it's not like urban areas in places like the Tahoe Basin where we estimate those are a vast majority of the landscape. In fact, when we were doing those numbers, the urban areas where we estimate those densities covered about 5 to 6% of the total landscape. So they're not large areas compared to the backcountry areas. The second point for clarification is that I think it's important to realize that those were only behavioral definitions for us of how much time bears were spending inside urban areas versus backcountry. It's not that those are separate populations. Those are still the same bear population. They're just behavioral differences of individuals on the landscape. They're still a mixed population in terms of breeding and gene flow and movements a little bit between those two. So don't interpret those as two different populations. And finally, I just kind of wanted to clarify a couple of things on a paper in particular that seems to be getting a lot of comments made on it. This is our 2008 paper that we published in Human-Wildlife Conflicts. And there's been a couple of points there where we estimated lambda, the growth rate of the population, and we showed that urban areas were sinks. Again, those are relatively small areas on a landscape, but we also, one of the things that is, I've seen comments several times is that they say that we estimated lambda as 1, a stable population in the backcountry. And in fact, a couple of points on that. We estimated those lambdas using life history tables, and there's some issues with, as you get towards the end of a life history table, your variance goes up a little bit, and you tend to underestimate lambda at the end of those because the data are truncated at the end of the life table. And so our estimates are actually lower, and we state that in the paper. So even though we said it was a minimum level of replacement in a stable population in the backcountry, we said minimally lambda was 1. And in fact, if you look on page 173, and I'll just quote ourselves in the paper, it says, in reality, lambda was likely higher for wildland bears, making the difference between urban and wildland females even more extreme. And so I just wanted to make the point that that was a conservative estimate of lambda. The bear population we felt was probably even, having a positive lambda that was above that. We just didn't know that amount. And so with the updated bear population numbers that we have now and the larger sample sizes, and working with Dr. Sedinger and Carl and myself through program mark and different analyses that Dr. Sedinger can address if there's questions about that, we've estimated lambda, over the last 10 years at 1.16. So just some points of clarification on the science.
Are we, do we want the commission to ask any questions of Dr. Beckmann? How do we want to do that?
Yeah, ask now.
Okay. Since we've got him he has got to go soon, so I think we need to take this opportunity. So any commissioners have any questions of Dr. Beckmann? Commissioner Rain.
Thank you. Talking about a conservative estimate being 450, is there a way you can come up with what would be a realistic estimate? I mean, it's nice to be on, that's the minimum it could be. What is it? What? Any idea what it is really?
Well, there's confidence intervals around that. And I mean,
yeah, you just cover that.
Turn this over to Jim on this particular question on.
Okay, so he'll cover that later.
Yeah,
okay.
So we'll cover that. I mean, we can change some parameters in the model and allow some things to vary and change the actual model type, but we wanted to have a conservative estimate for
Okay.
for that exact reason.
He covers that later.
So, yeah,
good.
we'll cover that.
There were some, I understand that in the committee meeting, I was not able to listen to it and obviously wasn't there, but there were some discussions about peer review. And would you be the person or would Dr. Sedinger be the person to ask questions about peer review?
You can ask me, that's fine.
Okay.
And Dr. Sedinger as well, he'll understand the process.
Help us, this word peer review, has been thrown around a lot, and when I hear it, I say, okay, that means your peers are reviewing the work. Could you go into a little bit more detail of exactly what that process is like, and one, who's doing the peer review, what are their qualifications, and how do they communicate that peer review to you, and what were the results of that peer review?
Okay, so from my perspective, the strictest definition as a scientist of peer review is submitting an article that lays out the methodology, the results, and the discussion of those results to a scientifically credible journal that has experts in that particular field, whether it be a certain methodology, a certain species, a certain ecological question or evolutionary question or whatever that question is. You submit it to the journal. There's a journal editor that then looks at that. They have associate editors that are specific experts in that field. And those editors will find a team of reviewers that have expertise in, and they try to generally find, an expert that's specific to that methodology and also has some experience with that species, another expert that's, has expertise in that species. And what they do is they go through that and they assess the methodology and the science that's gone into that paper and looking at the math and the analyses, make sure they're appropriate and it's reported correctly, and then they look at the interpretations to make sure that they agree with the interpretations of the math and the science and the data that are underlying that paper. Once they do that assessment, they then come back with comments specific to the manuscript of where it could either be improved or they don't agree with it, or if the math was wrong, they would say, hey, this is not correct, this is what really should happen if you look at other literature that's been published on this, and they help revise the manuscript. If those experts decide that the manuscript is not correct and it's too far off base, for lack of better terms, they will reject the manuscript, say this doesn't pass the test of the credible science. So once you go through that entire process and the editors make the final decision based on the reviewers that are experts in the field, then that paper is published in an academic science credible journal. And to me, that's the strictest definition of peer review. There's other peer review in the sense where, people can make comments, but from a scientific literature, as a scientist, where I'm held accountable is once it goes through that process, then it's gone through in many cases, incredible scrutiny. And this can take time. The process, it's not something easy. Once you submit an article, in some cases, it may take several months of back and forth and figuring out the math with all the experts if they don't agree and counterpointing. But once it's in there, it's generally accepted as peer-reviewed literature.
Okay, and so where are we on our peer review of this?
Yeah, so over the course of the last almost 15 years that Carl and I have been working on this, all the data that we've collected, we've peer-reviewed to this point. We're in the process of this current population model and the estimate, working with Dr. Sedinger, Carl, myself. We are in that peer review process. It has been submitted to a journal, and we've had reviewer comments back, and we're looking at those and addressing those right now, so we're in the middle of that process.
Okay. Did I cover all my questions?
No one.
Answer that.
I can't believe it, but I think I understood everything he said. But you don't have a score yet then, basically. It's still under the peer review.
Yeah, we have it tentatively accepted with pretty minor revisions. Basically, what they want is just a little bit more detail so everybody could see exactly what the analyses were. And so we're getting close on this particular paper.
Thank you.
Commissioner Drew.
Dr. Beckmann, I appreciate you coming out and all the work you've done in determining and studying our bear populations. And I asked you a question yesterday, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so before you leave, I want to give you a chance to relay the question and your answer to the whole committee. And the question that I asked yesterday was, based on your knowledge and experience with this population, if you thought the proposed quota would have a detrimental impact to the long-term viability of the black bear population.
Okay, and I'll give you the same answer I gave yesterday. I think given the state of Nevada, I think is extremely in a very good position. The amount of data on this black bear population at a statewide level is in my opinion, probably unmatched for a lot of states. To have these tight of confidence intervals, to understand the bear population, to have a long-term data set, that's my preference statement. And so what I would say is that looking at the harvest quota that's been recommended, I don't see any potential negative impacts on this bear population with all other things being equal. Now, of course, if the system would change or some major change would occur, then, you would have to reassess. And I'm confident that, NDOW is working to continue to monitor this population. That's always my caveat, as we hunt this population. I know NDOW's been doing this already, and they do an excellent job of it. Continue to monitor the population over time. And so that having that structure in place and the funding in place and all that to monitor the population as it's hunted is an important one. But I don't see any negative consequences for the quota set at this level for the bear population.
Okay, any other questions of Dr. Beckmann?
I would like to say one last thing if possible. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we are continuing the study. We are doing continuing radio collaring female black bears in the backcountry to look at reproductive success questions. I've got, working with NDOW and myself, we have a new PhD student on board that's addressing some of these issues with trying to model core habitat using, I'm not going to get too technical terms here, but resource selection probability function models and identifying core areas and using those to identify linkage areas where animals could move across these valleys, because I think keeping the linkages open between the Sierra part of the Sierra that's in California with Nevada is going to be important. And we're also beginning a new study to look at the genetics, to look at the level of gene flow and movement between California and Nevada. And so we are continuing the research to address a lot of the questions that are still out there, but we have a really good understanding, I think, of the dynamics of this population at this point.
Okay, one question I just wanted to, actually Carl mentioned it, was the growth rate, this 16% growth rate, 1.6 lambda. Because there's some comments to do with that rate. I happen to have taken a pretty deep dive on our mule deer model and got a copy of the model for a specific area that is near and dear to my heart. And so in going through that, there was a column there that had growth rate. And I look at it, and it's negative in some years and positive in others, and it goes up and down and up and down and up and down constantly. I mean, year by year. Right. Is there a similar type concept going on? I realize that when you take a data set that covers would seem reasonable, covers a whole period of time,
right?
A substantial period of time. There's probably some averaging going on, but the actual is probably going something like that. Is that kind of a...
Yeah, I and other ecologists sometimes refer to this every once in a while as the sine wave of life. Populations, if they're increasing, for example, they don't go up linearly. Or if they're stable, they're not flatline. Or if they're declining, they're not doing this. What they do is up and down. There's fluctuations depending on environmental conditions and variability. And, and especially in a system like the Great Basin, you get a drought, and, you may have a lag time between environmental conditions and when that, how that lambda is fluctuating. But over time, if it's increasing, it could increase in this way, could be stable, going around a stable population, which actually may be what's occurring in California, but that's another point of discussion. And then, if it's decreasing, it could be doing that. So what you need to do is look over the longer term, because it can fluctuate from year to year, and it can, change pretty rapidly. You can go from positive lambda to negative lambda from year to year over a couple year period, but that's why, if you're monitoring, you'll be able to detect the longer term trajectories.
So it's better to look at a trend as opposed to year by year.
I would say so, yes.
Yes. Commissioner McNinch.
Dr. Beckmann, I do appreciate you coming back in. We had a good meeting yesterday. It was I think there was a lot of good interaction. You had mentioned, you'd kind of touched on the concept of immigration and emigration just a minute ago. And I'm going to come back to that just for a moment. For those of you who don't know, I did not support the quota yesterday, and I'm likely in that same position today. And part of it has to do with some of the things that I just don't feel have panned out. But one of those has to do with the immigration and emigration of the population, specific with the the animals that are over in California, because we don't fully understand that relationship. It's not like they're two populations, because we're dealing with really a fringe part of a core population over in California. We're dealing with fringe population. Is that
Yeah, it's got a political boundary drawn down the
It's got a
middle of it,
political boundary
historically
drawn
one
down.
population, most likely, yes.
And so I guess my question is that we're working on understanding that relationship more, but how strong are your concerns with the power of that relationship, that bears might be the key to populating Nevada, that we don't have a lot of information on, we don't know to what extent?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is we're very confident that the population's growing. And the growth comes from two different inputs. You can have births, or you can have immigration into the population. What we haven't disentangled yet is the relative role of each of those. It's the growth rate that we're seeing in Nevada is partly due to both of those. Births here in our bears, and the role of immigration from California. We don't know the level of those at this point, but the study that we have with the genetic component that we're doing will allow us to address that, start to tease that apart.
And then just a follow-up question on the fringe or the edge, and I'm asking you because I just want to validate, but it seems to me that the fringe or the edge, at least in the from the knowledge that I have, they're a little more susceptible to changes. They're a little more susceptible in terms of being able to maintain their populations, because it's, the core is not going to give itself up to benefit the fringe. If there's problems with the population, the fringe is probably going to be the one that backs off. That would be?
That
Is
seems
that-
like a
is
fair
that-
statement to me. I would say, and that's why I would say that the monitoring is important.
Any further questions of Dr. Beckmann? Hey, Dr. Beckmann, I appreciate you
Thank you very
coming.
much.
We appreciate you taking the time and the effort to get here.
You bet.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Carl, what's our next step?
You guys can bring Dr. Sedinger up, ask specific questions of him on the population model if you'd like.
Okay, does he have a statement he wants to also maybe address some of the things that happened yesterday as well?
Yeah, either way, I think he's probably here just to answer questions and any concerns that anybody might have.
Okay. Okay.
Shed a little
Go
bit
ahead and bring
different
him
light
up.
on the whole process.
Okay.
For the record, Jim Sedinger, I'm a professor of wildlife at University of Nevada. I used to be next door, and now I'm up on campus. I thought I'd follow up with on John's just comment and the question about peer review to give you guys maybe put it in perspective that you might appreciate. And I think that I'm at a point in my career where peer review is a difficult enough process that I'm getting ready to say, take this job and shove it, because I think if most people understood the amount of scrutiny that peer review involves, or if you all were subject to this kind of scrutiny in your day-to-day activities, you'd quit your job. It's an extremely demanding process, and at some point you just get to the point where you don't want to be dealing with the critics anymore. So I would say that the paper that Carl and John and I have in review currently, the comments are generally pretty mild compared to what you can get. And so I'm pretty confident that we're just about finished with putting together our responses to the comments we received, and I'm pretty confident that paper is going to be published. So it should be, I would say, accepted for publication within the next certainly 3 to 6 months, something in that ballpark. So a couple comments on the analyses we've done, and I think there's a question about the rate of increase. And I think it's important to understand that whenever we're working with data, which we are in this case, and I think that, as John mentioned, that makes our case very strong, but it also is important to understand that there's always some uncertainty because we're sampling from populations. And our estimate of increase through the 2000s of about 16% per year, or something like that, is essentially an average, so with some uncertainty. I put, for the subcommittee yesterday, I put together a little set of what I would call simulations. So what I did is I took the starting value of 180 bears and the uncertainty around that value, and then allowed for annual uncertainty in the rate of increase, that 16%. And I produced 100 different possible trajectories that could have resulted from uncertainty in the starting value and the rate of increase. And then I put our current estimate in that cloud, and I think the subcommittee members all have copies of that. It's just a little graph, and it shows that our current estimate of about 450 bears falls right in the middle of the expected range that we should be at, given where we were 9 years ago. So I'm pretty comfortable with that number. And Commissioner Rain's question about can we get a, I don't know what the exact terminology is, but something other than a minimum estimate. And that's because of the issue of sampling. And I'll try to explain in a little more detail why that the heterogeneity that Carl mentioned gives us what we would consider a minimum estimate. Results from the following fact, and that is that, well, our expectation for the population. And the easiest way to visualize this is think about if in our bear population we had two groups of bears, one of which was easy to catch and one was difficult to catch. The ones that are easy to catch are going to represent most of the sample because they're easy to catch, whereas the ones that are difficult to catch are not very well represented in the sample, and as a result our population estimate tends to be based more on the ones that are easy to catch, so you can think of it as having a group out there that we can't get as good a handle on. And that means that the estimate we produce each time is a minimum, because we know that there's a sample out there that we're not quite getting our hands on as well as we would like to. And I think some of what Carl and John have proposed will help us to get at that in terms of the hair sampling that's being proposed, and also more radios on wildland bears to look at recruitment rates of those bears. Will go a long ways towards answering some of those questions, in addition to the immigration question that Commissioner McNinch raised. So I think I'd be happy to take any questions from commissioners at this point.
Okay. Do you have a question? I got one, huh? I would assume, being a population modeling expert, ecologist, I believe is the word that they use, that you're familiar with other bear populations in other areas, other jurisdictions, and because I think there was some reference to the sample sizes of this particular population model, here in Nevada, and compared to some others that are going on. And so could you kind of give us an idea of where we stand, in a scale of, are we, because it seems to me that we have relatively high confidence levels based on the amount of data we're looking at.
Yeah.
And how does that relate to some of the other models that are out there where decisions are being made on bear populations for purposes of hunting or other purposes?
Yeah, I would say I'm not a bear expert. I'm a population biologist who actually has worked mostly with waterfowl, but I'm very familiar with the techniques are applicable to any time you have marked animals. So I would say John would probably be better in terms of answering that specific question. I would say his statement is a fair one, that I know I worked with a former student at UNR who actually was doing black bear population estimates for the state of Alaska, for Alaska Fish and Game, and they were being forced, because of the remoteness of the terrain, to use much less or much more indirect techniques than actually having a big sample of marked animals and going out and recontacting those animals, which is the approach that Carl and John have been taking. In fact, but they were using a capture-recapture technique, but with more assumptions built into it. So they were using a system of putting out tetracycline-laced baits, and the tetracycline labels the bones, makes them fluoresce, and then they had hunters, they got pieces of bears from hunters, and so their second sample was what the hunters actually returned. But they're having to make some assumptions about, how many bears were exposed to a particular bait and so on, because it was all this remote sampling as opposed to the direct, okay, we know we have these marked bears out there, that's our sample. How many of those marked bears versus new unmarked bears are we encountering, which is the basis for the analysis that we've produced.
Okay. Commissioner Drew?
Dr. Sedinger, I think you know what my question is, and again, it's just so I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I asked you yesterday your professional opinion in terms of the quotas and the long-term viability of the population, and maybe you can provide similar commentary today. So
Sure.
Again, I'm not relying on my memory.
Yeah, I think that I think John made this comment yesterday. I think it's an important one. I'm not here to comment on the value of the bear hunt or anything else, but biologically, in my opinion, is it a sustainable hunt under the current circumstances? And I would also bring in the caveat that John made, that what I'm about to say is conditional on continuing the monitoring efforts that have taken place, and in fact, I think expanding those to some extent, which I think Carl and John have proposals that have been funded by Heritage that are going to help us along that road. I think I'm very comfortable with the quota as it exists in relation to our estimate of population size. And, we've got a minimum of 450 bears out there now. I think if you think about it in the worst case scenario, that we were completely wrong about everything, and that taking these 20 bears out of the population every year was going to cause a decrease of 20. You look at our estimate from 4 years ago, we had a little more than half as many bears as we've currently gotten. So if we were to take 20 bears out of this population for a decade, that would put us roughly back to where we were 4 years ago. So I think when you put it in that context, I think the department's recommendation is pretty conservative with respect to where the population is today. And for that reason, I think as long as the monitoring continues, I'm comfortable with the recommendation.
Okay.
Chairman, we're going to get to talk to Carl some more, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
You mean you don't have any questions?
No, I mean, I asked my questions yesterday, and Jeremy made a comment that he actually had Dr. Sedinger part of his classwork, and I've known Jim for quite a while myself and done a lot of safe grouse stuff, so I'm very familiar with how he conducts himself and he conducts his work, and he operates at a very high level with a very high level of integrity, and he's highly respected. So I do appreciate his comments and stuff. So, and there were a couple of things I don't know if necessarily cleared them up. That the modeling. I think it's fair to get it out that the model that you're using is typically used for closed populations, but the way that you have adjusted for that, and the way there's a sub-program that you're able to use that kind of compensates for that to some extent. So it's not a function of using an improper model in this case. It's a function of having to use a different, you could maybe explain it better. And the other component was that I think that has been part of the discussion. We didn't necessarily get into it a lot yesterday, is that kind of skirted on it a minute ago with Dr. Beckmann, is that when you guys are referring to a 16% growth, that's not like compounding interest in a bank account. Is that right?
It'd be more like compounding interest in your stock account. It's going up and down. I mean, that's the sort of the long-term mean, but obviously in some years it could even be negative. But in other years it might be going up 20%. So, so I think to think of it as a compound interest that just chugging along at 16% per year is a little bit, naive might be too strong a word, but it's more complex than that.
Okay, I guess that's what I was trying to draw to, is
exactly.
It's incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And we didn't necessarily get into a lot of those discussions in the last couple of days, and not a lot of questions asked on it, but it's very complex. There's no doubt about it. So,
Okay.
no specific questions for me.
Okay, any other questions of Dr. Sedinger? Okay, thank you, Doctor. Carl, what's, you ready for our report from the Bear Committee, or do you have any follow-up with regard to,
No, not really. Other than if you have specific questions, I can.
okay, I think Commissioner Howell had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carl, because our population is part of California's, and California's population is part of ours, they move back and forth, I got a couple of thoughts I'd like to present, and that is California, they sell a lot of tags every year, and they basically reach their harvest objective every year, right?
No, not every year, no.
It's
They
pretty
came
darn
really
close.
this past year. Previous couple of years, they were below that harvest objective, I believe.
Yeah.
But close, yeah. Close.
Close. And it's basically less than 10% of their tags. The harvest objective is less than 10% of the tags that are put out.
Well, they sell unlimited tags. They don't have a tag limit like we do.
Yeah, but I've checked the numbers, and they put out 20-something thousand tags, and then they harvest whatever their objective is, 1,800 for the year. Here's my point. We harvested 14 bears last year with 45 tags, right? And I understand you want to keep it more or less the same for 3 years, although you've already changed a little bit with the female. What I'm suggesting is, it would seem to me that, just say, for example, we put out 100 tags, we'd come a whole lot closer to reaching our harvest objective with 100 tags, I would think. Right?
Possibly, I think one
And
year.
I don't think 100 tags would harm the hunt any. I mean, it wouldn't get congested or anything of that nature.
I can't really say. I mean, 1 year's worth of data, we know where, I mean, hunters obviously aren't going to go and spend a lot of time in areas where there aren't any bears.
Right.
But with that said, whether, second year, different climatic conditions, where are hunters going to concentrate, I really can't say. I think biologically we could increase tags, sure. But to put some reliance on the data using our black bear management plan, that is why we recommended no change in the quota or change in tags, so we can evaluate this information on more than just a 1 year basis.
Yeah. So that increasing to 100 tags, you're saying, isn't a good idea right now.
Not my recommendation, no.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for Carl? Okay, seeing none, then I guess we're wrapping this all into one. You want to go ahead and do your report then?
Yep, it'll just take a second to do the
Okay.
report. So
Okay, thanks.
we did meet as a Bear Committee yesterday and into the early evening, very early evening. Another 4.5 or 5 hours, is that where we're at, guys? Okay, so real easy meeting. And there really was a lot of good discussion. I mean, everybody was, it's a pretty charged issue, and I don't know how much the audience has gotten information, but there was a lot of science and a lot of discussions surrounding the science that's applied and how it's evaluated. And I felt that there was generally pretty respectful discussion on that yesterday, and I do appreciate the fact that we were all able to keep it that way and get it out on the table. So the bottom line is that there was a motion to support the department's recommendations of 20, 40, 45, 41, 4, and a total of 20, and that motion did pass with a vote of 3-2. committee member Catherine Bricker and myself did dissent on that vote. So I suspect that as we move forward tomorrow and stuff, that we'll probably, unless we talk about it a little bit today, that we'll have some discussion on the thought processes behind each person's vote. It's certainly the commissioners. And so that recommendation is being brought forth to support the department's recommendations. And there was also discussion on conducting a workshop up at Incline Village. And we know the Department of Wildlife has spent a tremendous amount of time up there over the years. The Bear Aware program has taken a hit from a budgetary standpoint, so it's been a little bit less than probably desired over the last couple of years. But they still maintain a presence up there. But what's been lacking is a presence by the commission. And I think that I brought this forward as discussion. Catherine had mentioned it at one point, so we put it on the agenda and talked about it. And we were kind of at the end of our day. We lost our crowd. I think we had two people from the public here at the end of the day. But the committee did vote to bring that forward to the commission and recommend that we basically recommending that the commission give some license to the committee to come up with a potential informational type workshop, gather some input from people actually in Incline and get a feel for where they're at on some of the issues, and open the door for discussions on things like trash management, getting into a few of those types of issues and taking some direct input from the folks up there. And this would be ultimately taking some of that information and possibly turning it into bill drafts as necessary or whatever we would need to do. There was some discussion on the indoctrination course and making that a little bit public as part of this workshop concept. Requesting that representatives from Washoe, Carson, and Douglas be present and talking to them about trash ordinances, management in that area. And basically, I think kind of develop a new culture up there in Incline and wherever there's bear issues, that feeding of bears is not going to be tolerated. It creates problems and create a culture of if you're going to be living with bears, that's great. It's a wonderful thing, but anything beyond that is not going to be tolerated. And trying to create that culture and certainly put the rules, regulations in place to deal with that. We had a gentleman make comment that he'd spent. Matter of fact, he's here. I see him now, Lloyd. He lived with bears in his former home for 25 years, and they never had any problems because the culture was bears are wild, bears are something that you enjoy, but you don't. They're not pets. They're not something that you feed. They're not something that you bait in to show your friends from Kansas that may not see bears very often. That kind of stuff. So the concept of changing a culture and possibly starting that through a workshop. So those are the discussions. I don't know if Jeremy or Jack, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just one addition, and it was in terms of the quota recommendation, and it wasn't part of the motion, but it was a pretty strong sentiment, I think, from the whole committee that we strongly encourage NDOW to continue their monitoring efforts and, if possible, increase those efforts. And I know that's something that at least one commissioner, myself, will be looking at in the future as we do this on an annual basis. So.
Commissioner Rahm?
Another thing discussed was the way that we go about obtaining information, and the discussion I brought up yesterday is we did have the Heritage Commission or the Heritage Committee meeting yesterday. There was two proposals in there from Carl Lackey dealing with working with university researchers, bear DNA analysis and a reproductive success analysis. $100,000 worth of projects proposed, and the way the proposal came forward out of the Heritage Committee yesterday to recommend to the Commission at the next meeting is $70,000 worth of work of sportsman dollars going to research the bears to really tie up our data. I'm confident in the data we have, and I made a statement yesterday. It's kind of like trying to prove what we already know, but sometimes you have to do that to validate what you already know. So there is a commitment by the Heritage Committee at this point, not by the commission, but it was brought up by sportsmen in the general public of continuing to monitor and look for better science too. So.
So really, what the committee would be asking for today, the recommendations and stuff will be discussed tomorrow. But I would, under this agenda item, I think we'd be asking as a committee that the commission give some general broad support for putting together a workshop of some kind, informational, and trying to make a presence up in areas that we haven't necessarily made a presence in, and talk about things like trash management, potential funding, things of that nature. So.
I guess my position on that is that as to the issue of trash management and the urban conflict, these urban bears, that is probably one of the main things that I think this committee should be doing. We talk about this hunt, but there's a lot of bears that are dying from other causes, and I think there are a lot of those reasons go right back to what's happening, in the urban areas and what's drawing those bears in. And so that I definitely do think we need to do is deal with that issue. So, Ken, did you have did you have a statement that you wanted to make? Did you have a comment?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought you were looking at me like you wanted to make a comment.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Many wheels turning, unfortunately.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any any other comments before I take it out to the public? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and open up for public comment. And Vice Chairman Rob, do you have all the cards?
Yes, I believe I do. If
Okay.
I don't have all the cards, make sure you get them in. Let's not make it to the last minute. I know people hold on to the cards
Okay,
to
let
the
me,
last comment.
yeah, before you start, let me make the follow up with the commitment I made at the beginning, and that is if you want to talk in public comment with regard to this particular agenda item, you need to get your card into Chief Bonamici, and he's going to make sure it gets up here. So hopefully everybody's got their cards in and did that process. If you didn't, then let us know. And at the very end of this, I will then ask if there's any other public comments, so everybody will get an opportunity to speak.
Rick Hopkins?
For the record, Rick Hopkins. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I do so as a population ecologist who's worked on large mammals over the last 35 years, and as a co-founder of Live Oak Associates, which is an ecological consulting company in California. During the last 35 years, I've conducted a number of studies on mountain lions and have participated in numerous public policy debates as a carnivore export in Western states. I'm experienced and versed in management options, conservation strategies for various carnivores, including coyotes, cougars, black bears, and federally endangered San Joaquin kit fox. As it's already been discussed, there are four basic processes that determine whether or not a population is growing, declining, or remaining stable, and that's births, deaths, immigration, emigration. What is critical when trying to understand whether or not a population is expanding or contracting in a region is defining the spatial scale on which that question is posed. Much of the work being relied on in Nevada has been the product of the hard work of Dr. Beckmann and Mr. Carl Lackey, studies I might add that I greatly respect. But as often happens with predators, science is not the problem, but how one chooses to integrate evidence into a values-laden decision. In 2008, Beckmann and Lackey reported that mortality in urban areas exceeded recruitment, resulting in urban sinks. Additionally, bear densities were much higher in urban interface when compared with wildland bear density estimates. And as John's pointed out, that the urban areas represent a relatively small portion of the entire landscape, but still nonetheless, they do support higher densities. These authors concluded that given this unique source sink dynamic perpetrated usually by the large clumping of human food resources, bears in urban areas are currently unable to repopulate vacated wildland areas. Bear hunting occurs exclusively in the wildland areas, with urban areas continuing to act as sinks. The first hunting season in Nevada resulted in 14 bears being killed, the majority of which were in the Pine Nut Mountains. Anthropogenic mortality continues to be the greatest mortality factor for bears frequenting the urban areas, and now human-caused mortality is likely the greatest mortality factor for bears within the wildland areas, at least for the Pine Nut Mountains. Recently, Dr. Beckmann suggested that persistence of bears in Nevada depends on reducing urban sources of mortality for bears and maintaining connectivity with habitat in California, as he believes increase in black bear population in Nevada is largely due to immigration of bears from California. The Nevada study, as good and interesting as it is essentially working in a vacuum. It fails at the moment to incorporate one or more of the important parameters into the growth model, namely, to what degree does immigration from California contribute to the observed growth rate? To what degree is the perception of growth rate of bears in California indirectly informing inferences regarding the expansion of bears in Nevada and fluctuations in the bear population in Nevada? The real problem in studying bears in Nevada, then, is focusing on spatial scale that far exceeds the political boundaries of Nevada. An issue noted by Dr. Beckmann, as he noted, Nevada's population is not distinct and separate of California, and in fact, much of Nevada's bear population is simply the eastern edge of the California regional population. Black bear populations in California are distributed over about 53,000 square miles, and there's been some confusion as to what's going on in California. Up until this last year, California has suggested their population has increased from a few thousand bears in the mid-'80s to nearly 40,000 bears in 2010. Based on conversations that I had working with some NGOs with California and asking for providing some confidence intervals around those density estimates, they went back in and actually, to their credit, revised their population estimates, and I'll just pass that on. And there's some confusion as to what actually took place. As Mr. Lackey indicated, indices of harvest rates are never a really good indication of what's going on in the population. That's not how California has been estimating bear numbers in California. They've been collecting teeth from the harvested bears and using cement manuali to age bears and determine the relative size of the population. But unlike Nevada, because California is such a large state with such a large population of bears, the percentage of bears that are actually part of the sample is relatively small compared to what's been going on in Nevada. A large percentage of bears are marked in Nevada, which is one of the key reasons why their estimates end up with smaller confidence intervals. In California, what they've been doing is they have a relatively small percentage of bears marked, meaning part of the harvest. And so what ends up happening, and they pool those over the entire state, which is, you swamp a lot of data when you do that. So you're swamping the facts that growth rates would be different in various parts of the state. And so a lot of that gets completely swamped. And so they're looking at an average over the entire state. That's why the confidence intervals in California tend to be much greater, is it's the size of the sample and the fact that they're pooling those data over the entire state. So they're not using simply index data to determine the size of the population. But essentially what you have is that in 1987, they estimate there were roughly 25,000 bears in California. Today, they estimate there's roughly 30,000. So it's been a relatively flat, sort of like has already been described by Dr. Sedinger and Beckmann, is that you get these sort of fluctuating, following the food sources. Food sources are good years, increasing in bears and then decreasing in bears. So there's been what might be indicative of maybe a slight increase, but it's not been the dramatic increase that many have projected up until just last year when California revised its estimates. So I think that's important to put on the table, since your population is essentially the eastern edge of California's. And I just might like to add that while I don't think NDOW's done this, and I think they've been really good about this, there are some that consider that sport hunting of bears will somehow influence or reduce conflicts, and this simply has not been found to be the case. And so when considering bears, conflicts are more likely influenced by poor food years and the availability of food in or near human habitation. And there's been a lot of studies throughout North America that's found in declining bear populations, conflict incidences actually increase because it's relative to the level of good food resources. Good food resources, as was found last year, and Mr. Lackey said so in the Lake Tahoe News, that there was a great reduction in incidences last year, and that was due largely to two factors: the fact that they killed individual problem bears the year before, and that we had a really good year, and so there's good natural food sources in the wildlands. And so those bears weren't drawn into the urban areas. So in summary, I think there's no scientific or management need to hunt bears in Nevada, and even with the high level of research conducted in Nevada on bears, there still remains significant uncertainty as to the importance of immigration from California into Nevada to support stable or increasing bear populations. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. It's got all my notes still on it.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Just before we call up the next speaker, I didn't get a chance to tell Dr. Hopkins thank you, and we appreciate his contributions yesterday. I know he spent a lot of time answering questions. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we recognize that Dr. Hopkins was the expert for the no bear hunt, and so I think we went a little bit over our 6 minutes. But anyway, thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Okay.
Gerald Lent. Raquel Oster.
For the record, my name is Raquel Arthur, representing American Indian Movement of Northern Nevada. We are opposing any quota being set, for we are greatly opposing any sort of bear hunting in Nevada based on religious grounds. We will take the proper steps with complete legality to stop these hunts. We will utilize our rights under the Constitution, our freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, with the rights under the American Indian Religious Act, the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights. We will continue our fight peacefully to set the laws in place to honor those rights. The foundation of our rights have already been written. They state that we are able to conserve our ceremonies, medicine, and animals. Those bears are that, with the bear healing ceremonies, and even other ceremonies as well. On a quick side note, is that I don't have hate. I don't carry hate in my heart. I'm not that person. I respect each and every one of you as individuals, as fathers, as caretakers of your family. I wish nothing but great things for each of you. And with that said, I also heard many racist remarks last meetings, and I instructed my people not to respond. So I stand here today to represent and be the voice, to put myself here before you, even if that means that I'm hurt. But truthfully, no one can hurt me more than what I've already done to myself. And I accept this, and I will not go away. I will continue this fight. That's how much faith I have, and that's how much faith I have in this fight. That's how much honor I carry with these bears. And we speak of faith. Most can't see faith. Faith is visible to me through the eyes of my heart. Not through these eyes, but through my heart. So I will continue this fight as far as we go. So I just want to say that, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Casey Nelson.
For the record, Casey Nelson speaking for the Nevada Houndsman Association. We support the recommendations of the bear hunt as put forward by the Nevada Department of Wildlife. The Biology Department is responsible for determining the bear populations. We trust their science of what they've said, and we'd like to have more tags so we could go run, but we don't want to lose our rights on bears. And we love bears. Everything in my house has bears on it. You know, everybody thinks just because we like to hunt bears, we hate them, we loathe them. We don't. Everything I have has bears on it, mountain lions on it. I love them. I love to see them, love to hunt them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
On Moldy?
Is that a new hat?
No,
Got that one.
I don't think so, Mr. Chairman. Don Wilde-Reno, thanks for having the meeting and letting us talk. By the way, I guess I'm the first person to make note of a notable event. I hope it won't count against my time. We have in our audience today an actual retired former department employee who has come to our meeting. In fact, a former director. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Molini is here. I mention that because I'm going to use him in a joke. Years ago, when we were arguing bobcats, much the way we're arguing bears today, he told me at one point that we're knee-deep in bobcats in Nevada. And sometimes listening to the department, I think we're knee-deep in bears in Nevada. And maybe one day I'll have one at my bird feeders, but not yet. By the way, I'm glad Dr. Beckmann was able to clean up some of the stuff from the 2008 paper, which is a very interesting paper. But I read you 2 sentences from his September 11 letter, which sort of cleans up some of the stuff he cleaned up before he spoke to you. In summary, the existing data and analyses demonstrate that the bear population in Nevada is now increasing at an estimated lambda of 1.16. That's a 16%. Here's the next sentence that he says. However, it starts with however. Due to variability in the system, this is simply an annual average. This is not to say that the population will always increase at 16% or even increase in the future. That's the complete sentence. Here's my complaint about the quota, specifically that the females get no protection, particularly the older age wildland females, which are going to be the ones hunted. Let's take the numbers, 450 bears. The department says 2 to 1 males. So we got 300 males, 150 females. 150 females for the entire population. Now where do they live? Well, arbitrarily, let's say half are going to live in the urban areas, which are not going to be hunted. Half live in the wild area. So we got 75 female bears in the wild area. Now, of those 75, these are not all, obviously, older bears. They're cubs, first year, second year, third year, fourth year bears, females included in this 75. So one question I have then is, if you're going to be hunting the 75 female bears in wild areas, how many of those are ages 7 to 12, which is the primary reproductive age for producing cubs in this, what looks to me like a kind of a shaky situation? And I guess the answer is, I don't know, you don't know, and the department hasn't said. So let's just assume we have 12 age groups, 0 through age 12, let's say, and just arbitrarily divide 12 into 72. Get 6 bears per age group. 7 to 12, 6 age groups, 36 bears. Hunters kill 10, which is quite possible. Kill 30% of the females of cub production age. That is a very conservative estimate, just playing with your own numbers. I'm worried about that, folks.
Thank you, Dr. Moley.
Pamela Garden?
I want to thank the commission. I'll be repeating some of the comments I made yesterday. But I'm still concerned about them. I still don't quite understand whether the year 2007 was factored in to the population estimates. Because if Nevada's bear population was stable during the period studied by Goodrich in 1988 and Beckmann in 1998, but then the growth rate suddenly around the turn of the century started to accelerate, what accounted for this acceleration? And the department argues that the population didn't start growing at 16% per year until this turn of the century, which wouldn't contradict the figures for trapped bears if the population grew at only 3% from 1988 to 1998. However, there are still serious problems with that argument. The drought of 2007, along with the Angora fire in 2007, the California fires in 2008, resulted in an influx of bears and a surge in the population. 2007 not only falls within the study time span, but near its end in 2008, which is precisely the stage when a surge in transient visits by bears would have been most likely to exaggerate the apparent size and growth rate of the population. 2007 had a severe famine due to the drought. Drought likely caused a large number of bears to temporarily pass from California into Nevada and back. Of course, if the famished bears didn't merely visit Nevada, but became permanent residents, this would be true growth of the population. But it's not the kind of growth that is repeated every year or even every 3 years. So using data inflated by a transient influx of bears during 2007 as a basis for setting harvest quotas could soon lead to a serious overharvest. Again, until proven otherwise, long-term growth rate should not be assumed to exceed 3% per year, and 3% per year could be too high because the actual effect of the 2007 drought would have been to reduce population growth. Malnourished bears produce fewer cubs, and those cubs have especially low rates of survival. Adult mortality rates probably rose due to increased conflicts with humans and vehicles, and that was the case. If sustainable growth rate of the population had suddenly increased, something in the environment of the bears would have had to change enough to cause a dramatic increase in either both reproductive rate and survival rate. What has happened? Analysis by Beckmann and Lackey in 2008 showed that adults have very low rates of annual mortality. Those that die before old age have usually been killed by people. So the population's death rate could not have declined markedly unless human-caused mortality factors such as road and public safety kills have shrunk dramatically overall despite the surge in 2007. But NDOW has presented no evidence that this is the case. On the contrary, available information confirms that human-caused kills have increased, averaging 33 since 2006, and if you exclude 2007, the average is still 27.
Are you wrapping it up?
Okay, I'll talk faster here. That leaves
Well, we're at your limit, so yeah.
Okay, I'll stop there then.
Okay, thank you.
Carolyn Stark.
Hi, Carolyn Stark for the record. As you know, the most recent estimate from NDOW shows a 16% growth rate compared to a flat rate just a couple years ago. And they're claiming a change in methodology and also increased sample size as part of their thing, as part of the reasons behind such a huge growth rate. And in order to achieve, an average up and down each year, 16% growth rate, which includes mortalities, so it would be increases to population less mortalities equals the 16% thereabout growth rate. Well, in order for that to make sense, then based on the mortalities over the last 10 years, the increase in population due to birth or immigration has to range anywhere from 20 to 33%. And given that mammals or bears are the slowest growing mammal, or very slow producing, those figures just don't make sense. And also, what has changed in the Nevada habitat to get an immigration, such a large immigration from the California bears. And included in, I think, the population estimates is the year 2007. However, 2007, there was the Angora fire and there was a drought, and there was a huge increase in the bear sample sizes. And in fact, based on some of the bear data that we got through an open records request, 90% of the bears captured in 2007 came after the Angora fire. So again, I mean, that type of immigration is not going to stand up. And my experience I mean, I'm an accountant, but when you see an anomaly like that, you typically have to kind of disregard that or throw that out there. And, you know, nothing has really been said on their part about the 2007. I'm sorry, just kind of jumping around. And there's been at least 11 population experts that I know that have written in letters that have refuted NDOW's 16% growth rate in the population count of 450 bears. So I certainly hope that those are not going to be disregarded. And, you know, I think that the quota should be set at 0 until some of these things that are being refuted are looked into further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine Bricker.
Commissioner Rob, Dr. Hopkins today was representing the Bear League, and I'm representing No Bear Hunt Nevada. Is that satisfactory?
That's fine.
We appreciate your allowing him that extra time as well. Catherine Bricker, and I'm representing No Bear Hunt Nevada. We have expressed the position that we would like you to not approve any quota today. The reason that I would suggest that you should follow our advice are the same reasons you approved the bear hunt to begin with, the interest of the Nevada sportsman. What you have done in approving this bear hunt and continue today by approving quotas for the 2012 hunt are you are not recognizing the expressed value of the public of Nevada on this issue. The values of the public of Nevada have been made very clear through numerous sources. We presented to Governor Sandoval, over 20,000 individual comments opposing the bear hunt. Since then, there have been in numerous papers, and they are ongoing as we speak, polls of the public. We realize that newspaper polls are not scientific, but there are accumulated now a trend of over 40,000 people who have voted on various newspaper polls, and in the 90 percentile oppose the bear hunt. And so by approving the quota today for the 2012 hunt, you certainly have the power to do so. But what you are showing to the public is what we have contended from the beginning, that by doing so you do not act in the interest of the Nevada sportsman. You, in fact, demonstrate why 2% of Nevada's population, the Nevada sportsman, should not be in charge of making 100% of the decisions regarding wildlife management. You are not listening to the people. I also sat on the Bear Committee yesterday, and there were some interesting things that came out of that, and I'd like to communicate a few of those to you. It was interesting to me that even though No Bear Hunt Nevada and a few other organizations brought in peer review, that not one of the 3 sportsmen sitting on the commission had one question for Dr. Hopkins. There were no inquiring minds wanting to know. I was quite interested in some things that Dr. Beckmann said in response to Commissioner Drew's question, which he asked again today, and which he did not ask of Dr. Beckmann, Dr. Hopkins. There is a difference between could we have a bear hunt and should we have a bear hunt, even amongst the professionals. And not one of them, including Dr. Beckmann, said that we should be having a bear hunt. He differed from the other experts we brought in as peer review as to whether we should at all. They disagree that we have the bear population, that we should be considering a hunt, that it's inherently risky with a small population. We have certainly not proven the immigration issue, and that has not been peer reviewed or published. It was interesting, Ann Bryan of the Bear League was there at the committee, and she made a report that she is participating in a research project being done in California that will be presented at an international bear symposium upon completion of the study. And so far they've captured, in the past year and a half, 9 different bears. They were able to radio collar 8 of them. 6 of them were personally known to Ann as Homewood California bears in Lake Tahoe. She'd known them since they were cubs, so they're obviously a population that stays in that area. The interesting thing is, even though these radio collar bears are immigrating as far down as Strawberry, California, in the California side, there is zero data to indicate that they pass the border into Nevada. So if we're looking at data that hasn't been published yet, there's some that you might want to hear about, that study is not showing the immigration. Dr. Moldy also pointed out that we feel that, I think that in a sense, I would encourage you not to behave as President Obama is behaving in claiming that his problems are the economy and he inherited from George Bush. The commission who passed the bear hunt into being is no longer here, and I feel this commission, by approving this increase in sows quota, is making the situation much worse. Dr. Moldy pointed out that hunter preference is certainly going to show them wanting to hunt larger bears, and larger female bears would be older bears. And Dr. Beckmann's research and others show that in the wildland, the reproductive rate is towards older females. So you're definitely going to be negatively impacting the reproductive rate in wildland female bears by passing this quota. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make one comment, and that is, and when we have public comment, we've been advised by our DAGs that public comment is not public debate, and so we take that public comment and we take it into account. And I know that in some of the discussions we've had with Dr. Beckmann and Dr. Sedinger, that they listen to those comments as well as all the written comments and have addressed them. And so anyway, the reason that questions aren't asked of the experts that are giving public comment is because we're just taking that information in.
Jackie Chandler.
Thank you. My name is Jackie Chandler. I am the Executive Director of Sustainable Tahoe and the appointed National Geographic Center for Sustainable Destinations liaison for the Tahoe watershed in 2007. And in 2008, the Department of Interior, 5 offices in that department, Department of Fish and Game Wildlife, BLM, Indian Affairs, U.S. Forest Service, and Park and Recreation signed a MOU at the federal level with National Geographic, endorsing, if not mandating, all U.S. destinations become geotourism destinations, and committed 10 years to this effort, 10 years of their efforts. So that would drip down to you as supporting geotourism. Let me just show you the kind of money that geotourism brings in. The state of New York, $16 billion a year from birders. They don't kill anything, they just take pictures. Up in British Columbia, they do have a bear hunt, and we are on the grizzly menu. $2.5 million a year to kill the bears in British Columbia. That's pretty good annually. We could use that money here. Now remember, we're talking about beers and a buddy and a tag. Then they started a photo safari. That's where you actually bring your family. And you put time aside because you may not see the bear the first day, and you want to photograph wildlife. $7 million annual revenue direct for the guide. Another times 10 for the eat, sleep, and shop that destinations make their real money at. So now we're talking $70 million a year to look at bears and take pictures and kill nothing. I think Nevada has the economic problem. It's worth looking at this. I know Senator Reid has been having meetings with tourism, looking at how we can reinvigorate our tourism. And the opportunity to have wildlife, one of our key treasures next to alternative energy probably, be a photo safari experience not only brings in way more people and families, usually don't bring your girlfriend on a hunt, and we're missing a lot of money. It's literally lying on the ground with our wild mustangs, our wild bears, our wildlife in general, and the birding alone. I mean, really, extinct is forever, but photos are forever too, and memories are forever. I think there's a greater financial opportunity. Also, so I'm basically advocating no quota, and I'm very concerned that the pine nut area our Washoe allotments, and there's a violation in there too that needs to be looked into. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
David Coley?
I just have a question. My name is David Colley, and I live up in Incline. And I'm confused because I seem to see a conflict of interest in the Department of Wildlife's existing staff perspective, apparent perspective of supporting the hunting and representing a small percentage of the population that are hunters, when the responsibility is to 100% of the population. And if they are hunters, the approach in their scientific research could be significantly biased by their personal views and feelings about it. That's all I have to say.
Chris Wamberger? Are you representing?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, just an observation and a request for a comment. Since based on the bear population numbers being presented by Mr. Lackey et al., and the lack of a quota or a cap on female bears in this hunt, I remember Mr. Lackey telling us that we needed to hunt them with dogs so that we could sex the bears, so that we could maintain the 6 female bear limit. Now, it doesn't seem that we need the dogs any longer, and I'd like you to comment on that, please. Thank you.
That's all the cards I have at this moment.
Okay, we've gone through all the cards. Is there anybody else in public comment? Come on up.
Jack, I gave you.
Oh, so you're the one.
Okay. I have cards that say various. I do not have cards that say they want to speak on this agenda item. Those are all the cards that I have marked for that agenda item.
Sake. For the record, Bob Brunner. I was at the Bear Subcommittee meeting yesterday, and we addressed many of these things. There was a lot of discussion about the data. Is it up? Is it down? Is it this number? Is it that number? Is it 16%? Is it 300 bears? Is it 400 bears? And basically what it comes down to is we don't have enough information for you folks to make the best wildlife decision for the bears. Okay, you're required by state law to manage the bears. Okay, not to not manage them because people are upset. You're required by state law to manage the bears. And if that means no quota, then that means that you're still managing them. Okay, but we don't have enough data. You also heard Carl up here saying that he's just working with this population of bears in the subsection of the entire state. Okay, these conflict urban bears where he's been focusing, we found out last year at the only hunt we've had that hunters didn't hunt in a conflict urban area. Okay, so the hunters are bringing in different information than what Mr. Lackey is bringing in. We also have lots of new studies going on. We have lots of new information coming in. And right now, to stop this or change this or do something different and restrict the information that's coming in is going to be counterproductive. So again, we got lots of, everybody can debate the numbers and everything like that and then try and use the same numbers as concrete. That's just false. We have lots of things out there that will answer questions as far as immigration, and those are the things we need to take a look at. We're not hunting bears in the Tahoe Basin, so photographic tourism can go on freely like that. This is to maintain a healthy population of bears, and that's your job. What is the healthiest population, and how do we do that? And that's by collecting data, and that's by analyzing the data. And we don't have enough information right now, so we need to keep this going and get the information that we need. Okay, so I recommend we maintain this and we continue gathering all the information we can so you can go ahead and make the best decision in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that has a various card?
Any other public comment? with regard to the bear agenda item? Suzanne, where are we on lunch? 12:15, okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the commission then. This is an action item. It was originally an informational item, and we made it action so we could get public comment, to allow public comment. So anyway, I don't know. When I look at the agenda, we've actually got the actual decision on the bear quotas tomorrow on agenda item 16B. So that's basically when we're going to do it. So I don't know.